The sky burned red over the village of Hearthwood. Smoke curled into the dawn like black serpents, choking the horizon. Screams echoed through the valley as soldiers on horseback rode down anyone in their path. Women, elders, even those who begged on their knees. The banner of the king, once a symbol of order, now fluttered with blood. Among the chaos, a woman ran. Her name was Mara. Her dress was torn, stained with ash and sweat. One arm carried her youngest son, barely 3 years old, while the other clutched the hands of her twin daughters, who stumbled behind her on tired legs. "Keep running," she whispered, voice hoarse. "Don't look back." But one of the girls tripped. Mara dropped to her knees, shielding the child with her body, just as an arrow pierced the tree beside them. Bark exploded. The boy in her arms cried out. Another shout came from the woods closer this time. "Go! Go!" she urged, pushing them forward. They ran blindly into the forest. Deeper. Farther. Away from the fire that had devoured their home. Their neighbors. And her brother, who had stayed behind to buy them time. By midday, Mara collapsed near a stream. The children huddled around her, hungry, trembling, eyes wide with terror. Her own breath came in gasps. Blood seeped through. The cloth tied around her thigh, a cut from a blade, not deep, but worsening. She had no strength left. "I'm sorry," she murmured to the trees. "I tried." Then the world blurred and turned to darkness. He found her there. A soldier, cloaked in the muted steel of the royal army, but with eyes that had seen too. Many deaths. His name was Gareth. He had been tracking rebel fugitives through the lower valleys for days. Orders were clear. No one was to be spared. But this wasn't a rebel camp. This was a mother, barely conscious, surrounded by children who couldn't stop crying. He raised his sword, but his hand didn't move. The woman stirred. One eye opened, bloodshot and glazed with fever. She didn't beg, didn't plead. She just said one word, "Please." Not for herself, but for the children. Something inside him cracked. Gareth knelt beside her, checked her wound, then gave the children the last bit of dried fruit from his pouch. He looked around, then hoisted Mara into his arms. "You're safe," he said, though he wasn't sure it was true. An hour later, they reached an abandoned hunting lodge in the hills, a place only he knew, hidden from patrols and forgotten by maps. He cleaned her wound with stream water, tore his own cloak to bind it, and built a fire from broken beams and pine needles. The children watched in silence, too stunned to speak. Only when the youngest, still clutching a small carved horse, tugged on his sleeve and whispered, "Will Mama die?" did Gareth's voice crack. "No," he said softly. "She's strong." That night, Mara stirred in her sleep. She whispered a name. Taran. Gareth frowned. Taran Valor. The name rang a bell. A war hero. A former royal guard who had died defending civilians during the Eastern Massacre. His eyes widened. Maera. Was his sister? And suddenly, Gareth understood who she was and what she was running from. He sat in silence for a long time, staring into the fire. By every rule of the crown, she should be turned in. But something about her, the defiance. In her silence, the way she clutched her children even in sleep, the blood she had lost without complaint. It made something stir in him that years of war had nearly buried. Honor. Not the kind printed on scrolls, the kind born of mercy. Outside, the wind shifted, and Gareth knew he would not turn her in. He would protect this woman, and whatever storm came after, even if it cost him everything. Gareth had always been a man of duty, trained from the age of 10 in the capital's barracks. He'd bled for the kingdom, killed for it, and buried brothers in its name. His loyalty was carved into the muscle of his hands. the same hands now trembling as he wrung out a cloth to cool. A woman's fevered brow. A dot. She slept in the corner of the hunting lodge, the fire casting flickering shadows on her face. Her skin was pale, her lips cracked, but the bleeding had stopped. Gareth sat beside her, elbows on his knees, mind tangled in war and memory. Taren. Veller. He hadn't thought of that name in years. Taran had been a legend among the guards. Brave, blunt, fiercely loyal to the people. He had died protecting a group of villagers during a royal purge. The court had buried the story in silence, calling it desertion. Now Gareth knew the truth. And the sister of that man lay on a bed of hay, half alive, with 3 children who carried. His fire in their eyes. The door creaked. Gareth turned. One of the girls, the older twin, stood near the threshold, hugging herself. She looked like her mother, dark curls tangled, dress torn. "I had a bad dream," she said. He gestured to a pallet near the hearth. "You can sleep by the fire." She hesitated. "Are you going to hurt us?" Gareth blinked. Then, softly, "No." She studied him, as if deciding whether to believe that. Then she walked over, curled up beside her sister, and pulled the younger boy close. The trust of children. So easily broken, so hard to earn. In the morning, Mara opened her eyes and found Gareth crouched beside her, offering water. She drank slowly, each swallow painful. "Where are we?" she whispered. "A lodge in the northern woods," he said. "No one comes here." She tried to sit, wincing. He gently helped her up, keeping his hand at her back. Her gaze locked on his armor, the sigil of the royal guard still etched on his chest plate. "You're one of them," she breathed. "I was." A pause. Mara's voice turned sharp. "Then why am I alive?" Gareth looked her straight in the eyes. "Because you don't deserve to die." She stared at him, uncertain, then glanced toward her children, still asleep. "You know who I am," she said. "I know who your brother was." That made her go still. Taran was a better man than the crown ever deserved, Gareth added. Her shoulders eased just slightly. "He died protecting farmers. They called him a traitor." "They call me a hero," Gareth said bitterly. "I think they're wrong on both counts." Mara's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. They spent the day in silence. Gareth hunted a rabbit and cooked it with herbs he remembered from his childhood. The children ate like wolves then, curled up in blankets he found in a trunk. Mara remained quiet, watching everything with eyes that had seen too much. But that night, as he sharpened his blade by the fire, she spoke again. "You'll be hunted too," she said. "I know. They'll hang you if they find you with U.S." He nodded. "So why stay?" Gareth's voice was low. "Because I've followed too many orders, and too few instincts." She tilted her head. "And what do your instincts say now?" He met her gaze. "That I'd rather live in exile with people worth protecting than serve a crown that burns the world." Mara didn't answer, but she didn't look away. And that, Gareth thought, was more than enough. The days that followed were wrapped in quiet. Not peace, not yet, but a hush, like the forest itself was holding its breath. The children adjusted. First, by the second morning, they were no longer afraid to speak. The twins, Lyra and Sira, whispered to each other, built pretend houses from pine cones, and drew figures in the dirt with sticks. The youngest, Bram, followed Gareth everywhere, tiny boots crunching in his wake like an echo. Gareth found himself answering endless questions. "Why do you wear so much metal? Can you really ride a horse with one eye closed? Did you ever fight a dragon?" He told them no, but once, a wolf. They gasped and begged for the story. Mara watched from the doorway of the lodge, arms crossed, unsure whether to laugh or cry. One morning, Gareth brought back a small wooden knife, It's dull, he told Bram, but you can use it to help. Carve kindling. Bran's eyes lit up. Really? Gareth knelt beside him and showed him how to whittle without cutting too deep. The boy's fingers fumbled, but he kept trying. When he finally shaped a rough, crooked twig, he held it high like treasure. I made a sword. Gareth grinned. Looks sharper than mine. Mara shook her head. You'll spoil them. He looked up. They deserve it. Later, while the children napped, Gareth sat outside, sharpening his real blade with slow, steady strokes. Mara joined him with a bowl of berries she'd foraged. Gooseberries and wild strawberries. Sweet and tart. She handed him a handful. You're good with them, she said quietly. I never had any of my own. Her voice softened. You wanted to? He nodded. Once, before the war took that from me. She didn't ask more, but he saw something shift behind her eyes. Something warmer, less guarded. That evening, a storm rolled in. Thunder cracked like cannon fire. Rain pounded the roof. The children clung to Mara, but Bram slipped free and ran to Gareth, burying his face in the soldier's chest. It's just noise, Gareth whispered, pulling the boy close. Loud things don't always mean danger. Mara watched them, the man in armor, the child wrapped in his cloak, and something inside her, long buried beneath ash and fear, began to ache. Not with pain, not with longing. When the storm passed, Mara found Gareth standing outside, soaked to the bone, staring up at the clearing sky. You don't have to keep pretending you're not afraid, she said, stepping beside him. He chuckled. I'm not afraid of thunder. No, she said, but of what comes after. Of what happens when this quiet ends. He looked at her, serious now. I've lived through battlefields, seen cities burn, lost men I called brothers. But this, hiding, healing, waking up to. Laughter instead of orders. It scares me more than war ever did. She didn't speak for a while. Then softly, because it feels like home, he turned to her. Because I don't want to lose it. Inside, the children were asleep again. The air smelled of smoke and wet leaves. And as Gareth and Mara stood side by side in the moonlight, neither of them said the word, forming silently between them. But both felt it. Not yet love, but the unmistakable beginning of it. It began with hoofbeats. Not thunder this time, not the sky cracking open, but a slow, deliberate pounding on the forest floor. Gareth froze where he stood, crouched by the creek gathering water. He placed the pail down gently and reached for the hilt of his sword. They had found him. He didn't know how. Maybe a patrol had tracked the smoke from their fires, or maybe some old trail had betrayed them. But the sound was unmistakable. Soldiers. Back. At the lodge, Mara sensed it too. She stood at the window, spine stiffening. The children were still inside, playing with sticks and stones, oblivious. But Mara's breath shortened. Her instincts, once dulled by months of survival, screamed again. She reached for the knife hidden in the hearth. Just in case. Gareth returned moments later, panting, soaked with sweat. They're close. Mara's voice barely trembled. How? Many? 3, maybe 4. Not a full unit, but armed. She didn't ask what they wanted. She already knew. They moved fast. Maer gathered the children, told them to stay low, quiet. Gareth kicked dirt over the fire and pulled them into the forest, guiding them through a path he'd never intended to use. A narrow trail that led through brambles and shadows toward an old stone hollow carved into the hillside. It wasn't much, but it would buy them time. They reached it just as the soldiers arrived at the lodge. From the hollow's entrance, Mara could see smoke curling again, not from the fire they left behind, but from the torch of the lead horseman. They'll search, Gareth whispered. And if they find signs. Mara grabbed his arm. Then we run. He looked down at her, her eyes full of steel, not fear. You've done this before, he said. She nodded. Too many times. The next hours passed in silence. The children slept in her lap, breathing slow and shallow. Gareth stood at the entrance, blade drawn, watching every flicker of movement between the trees. The forest had gone still, unnaturally, so. Then a sound soft, deliberate, the crunch of a boot on moss. Gareth held his breath. A soldier stepped into view, alone, crossbow lowered, scanning the ground. Gareth didn't move. The man passed within 10 feet of the hollow's edge, then paused. He bent down, inspecting broken twigs. One more step, and he would see them. Gareth shifted silently behind him, ready to strike, not out of vengeance, but necessity. But then, a crack, distant. The soldier straightened, glanced over his shoulder, and called out, "North side's clear." Moments later, he was gone. When night fell, Gareth and Mara led the children deeper into the woods. They didn't speak until the stars were overhead and the howls of wolves reminded them they were no longer anywhere safe. Gareth finally broke the silence. "This is my fault." Mara shook her head. "No, we were never safe. Just lucky." He looked at her. "You could leave me. Take the children. Find another village. Change your name. I'm tired of running," she said firmly. "If they want to take us, they'll have to fight for it." Then she paused. "But we need somewhere permanent. Somewhere not just to hide, but to live." Gareth nodded. "I know a place." He didn't say where, only that they would have to walk until dawn. As the children slept on their backs, Gareth and Mara took turns carrying them, not as fugitives anymore, but as something closer to a family. Neither of them said the word, but the way they moved, side by side, through the dark, spoke it without needing sound. They found it by accident. A cottage carved into the mountainside, long abandoned, its roof half collapsed, ivy clinging to every stone. A place forgotten by maps and men. Gareth approached first, sword in hand, while Mara kept the children behind her, watching the tree line. No footprints, no ash, no smell of recent life. Safe, for now. By nightfall, they had made it livable. Mara swept the dust from the hearth, while Gareth patched holes in the roof with branches and old cloth. The children collected pine cones and laughed when they tumbled into piles. For a moment, it felt almost normal, like they weren't fugitives, weren't hiding from a kingdom that wanted them erased, just a family repairing a broken house. After the children were asleep, Gareth built a fire and sat nearby, sharpening his blade more out of habit than need. Era sat across from him, legs folded beneath her. She had washed in the nearby stream, her hair still damp, skin flushed from the cold. For the first time in weeks, her voice was calm. "You never told me where you're from," he smiled faintly. "The south, near Riverend. Grew up chasing frogs and throwing rocks at soldiers, until I became one. Funny how life twists." He nodded. "And you?" "Born in a village called Fenmore. My father was a healer. My mother taught me how to dry herbs and stitch wounds." She paused, then added, "That's how I knew what to do when you were bleeding." His eyes softened. "You saved me too, Mara." Their gazes held for a moment too long. She looked away first. Later, she stood to tend the fire, but stumbled, her ankle giving way. Gareth was at her side in seconds. "Sit," he said gently. Guiding her back to the blanket, she obeyed, breathing heavily. "I'm fine." "You're not." He knelt in front of her, reached for her foot, and carefully removed her boot. The skin was swollen, slightly bruised. She winced as he pressed. "Not broken," he murmured, "just strained." His hands were rough, but his touch was careful. Almost reverent. She looked down at him. a warrior who had taken lives, now tending to a twisted ankle like it was a sacred duty. "Why are you like this with me?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Gareth looked up, his expression unreadable. "Because I've been taught to destroy ... And you remind me I can still protect." The silence stretched ... and Mara's fingers brushed his jaw ... rough with stubble. Warm from the fire. "You're not who I expected," she said. He leaned closer, heart thudding against armor he no longer wore. "I'm not who I used to be." And then, without fanfare, without permission sought or needed, their lips met ... soft, careful, as if both were afraid the moment would vanish if held too tightly. But it didn't vanish ... it deepened. Grew urgent ... her hands tangled in his collar. His fingers cradled the side of her face. They breathed each other in the scent of pine, smoke, and something sweeter still. When they finally parted, her forehead rested against his. "This is dangerous," she whispered. He nodded. "Everything worth keeping is." They didn't speak of love ... not yet. But that night, when the fire burned low and Gareth laid a blanket over her sleeping children, he returned to Mara's side, and they fell asleep with their hands entwined ... not in lust, not in fear, but in the quiet promise of something that neither sword nor crown could take away. The frost came early that year. Mara stepped outside at dawn to find a thin layer of ice on the water bucket. Her breath rose in clouds as she rubbed her arms, listening to the stillness. In the weeks since they'd arrived at the mountain cottage, life had settled into something close to peace. But peace, she knew, was never permanent ... not for people like them. Inside, Gareth stirred the fire to life. His hair was damp from the stream, his shirt clinging to his chest. Mara glanced at him, a quiet ache blooming in her chest. This man had become everything ... protector ... father figure. And something more dangerous still, a hope she hadn't allowed herself in years. He looked up and smiled. "You're cold," he said. She smirked. "You're observant." He stepped toward her, wrapping his cloak over her shoulders without a word. The warmth in it, and of him, made her heart stutter. Later that day, Gareth returned from a hunting trip, brow furrowed. They were here. Mara tensed. "Who?" He dropped a crushed leather emblem into her hand. The royal crest, broken, soaked in snowmelt. "A scout. Alone, I think. But fresh tracks lead south." Her voice dropped. "You think he saw the cottage?" "I can't be sure, but it means we're no longer invisible." That night, they packed quietly. Gareth retrieved a map from beneath the hearth, a faded scrap drawn by an old smuggler he once knew. It showed a pass through the eastern hills, beyond which lay the Whispering Glade, a forest few dared to enter. "That's our best chance," he said. "No soldiers, no law, just trees." Mara nodded. Then paused. "What if we stop running?" Gareth blinked. "You mean, what if we fight?" He looked at her, stunned. She lifted her chin. "I'm tired of being prey." For a moment, he saw her brother's fire in her eyes. Terran's blood, Terran's courage. But Gareth shook his head. "They'll come with swords, armor, orders signed by kings." Mara stepped closer. "And what do we have?" He met her gaze, each other. In the dark, after the children were asleep, they sat close by the fire. Mara leaned into him, head against his shoulder. "I never thought I'd feel safe again," she murmured. "You're not safe," he replied softly. "But you're loved." The words surprised even him, but they were true. She looked up, lips trembling, and for the first time, she let herself believe it. That same night, far below in the valley, the scout who had fled the mountain reached a royal outpost. He dropped to one knee before the captain of the guard. "I found them," he said. "The traitor, the woman, and the children." The captain's eyes narrowed. "Send word to the capital," he ordered. Tell them we found the rebel's sister. Above, in the silence of the mountain, Gareth and Mara dreamed of freedom. But the crown was already awake, and it was coming. The snow fell silently, blanketing the forest in white. It was beautiful, almost peaceful, but Gareth knew better. Snow muffled sound, hid tracks, and covered the boots of marching soldiers just as easily as it did the paws of deer. He stood at the edge of the ridge, scanning the tree line below. Smoke. Theirs. Back at the cottage, Mara stirred a pot of stew, unaware. The twins were sewing, small cloth dolls, and Bram had fallen asleep with a piece of bread in his hand. Gareth entered quietly. We need to move. Now. Mara's head snapped up. They're close? Closer than ever. They gathered what they could. Blankets, dried meat. A tiny carved horse Bram refused to leave behind. Mara strapped the children in layers of wool, trying to stay calm. Gareth handed her a dagger, not for hunting, but survival. He paused, then pressed something into her other hand. A folded piece of parchment, sealed with wax. What is this? She asked. Coordinates, he said. A safe place. If we get separated, go there. She opened her mouth to argue. He shook his head. Don't be a hero. Be a mother. Her eyes welled, but she nodded. They slipped into the trees before the sun was fully up. Gareth led them east, following a ridge line that gave them height but exposed them to wind and frost. Behind them, he spotted movement, flickers of steel between trees, torches. At least 6 men, too many to outrun, too close to risk, leading them to the glade. He stopped suddenly. We split here. Mara's voice cracked. No, they're tracking me, he said. Not you. I've seen the scout who marked us. He recognizes my face. She stepped toward him. I won't let you. He kissed her, not desperate, not rushed, but final. I'll buy you time. Mara's hands trembled against his armor. Come back, she whispered. I will. He lied. She didn't watch him go. She turned, took the children by the hand, and disappeared into the snow-covered brush. A ghost of herself, moving with a mother's fire. Gareth ran west. He left prints on purpose, broke branches, kicked stones, anything to lure them off her trail. Soon, he heard the shouting behind him. Over there. That way. Arrows whistled past his head. He kept going, deeper into the gully, until he reached the frozen river. He stopped, turned, and faced them. The captain of the royal guard dismounted slowly, a cruel smile on his face. Well, he said. Gareth, of Riverend, the prodigal sword. Gareth said nothing. He just raised his blade. The fight was brutal. Steel clashed. Snow turned red. He moved like a man possessed, not to win, but to delay, to make every breath a wall between them and Mara. Took a spear to the shoulder, a sword to the thigh. Still he stood. Still he fought, until he dropped to one knee, gasping, blood soaking the snow. The captain raised his blade for the final strike. And then a crack. A shadow moved in the trees. Arrow flew. The captain fell, eyes wide in shock. Mara stepped into view. Bow in hand, face like winter. I told you to run, Gareth whispered. I changed my mind. They fought side by side, 2 against 4, until the others fled, retreating into the forest like wolves beaten from a den. When silence returned, Mara knelt beside him, pressing cloth to his wounds. You came back, he said. Her voice broke. You promised. As the snow continued to fall, Gareth closed his eyes, not in pain, but in peace, because Mara had chosen him. Not just to love, but to stand with. To fight with. To live for. The fire crackled softly in the cave. It wasn't much, just a dry hollow in the hillside, but it held warmth, light, and the 5 souls who had survived what should have broken them. Mara pressed a fresh poultice to Gareth's side. The wound was deep, but clean. He would live. She had made sure of it. Ram slept against Gareth's arm, clinging to him like a cub to its father. Lyra and Sierra whispered under shared blankets, eyes finally calm. For the first time in months, there was no pursuit, but they all knew it wouldn't last. "I can't keep running," Gareth murmured later, when only Mara was awake beside him. She looked at him, brow furrowed. "I know," she said. "I won't survive another winter like this. Not wounded. Not with them always a step behind." She nodded slowly. "So, we stop," she said, "but not by surrendering." The next morning, Mara did something Gareth didn't expect. She took the parchment, the one with the coordinates to safety, and burned it. He stared. "We can't keep relying on hidden places," she said. "We need to claim one." He didn't argue, because she was right. Over the next few days, they found an abandoned outpost, a former border tower, long forgotten after the last war. The roof held. The well worked. The view stretched across the valley. They repaired it, brick by brick, wall by wall. Gareth trained the children with wooden sticks. Mara planted bitter herbs in the frost. And when scouts came, as they didn't flee. They fought. Together. Whispers began to spread across the kingdom. Of a woman in the mountains with the fire of rebels in her eyes. Of a man who once bore the king's crest, now leading orphans and widows in defiance. Of a place where exiles gathered, not in hiding, but in hope. They called it Hollow Crown. One evening, Mara stood atop the tower, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. Gareth joined her, his limp more visible now, but his grip strong. "They'll send more," she said. He nodded. "And we'll be ready." She turned to him. "I never imagined this life, this war, this love." He smiled softly. "Neither did I, but I'd choose it again. Every time." Below, the children lit lanterns one by one. A signal, a beacon, a dare to the world. That in a broken kingdom, a new family had risen, forged not by blood, but by choice. Not beneath a crown, but beyond its reach. Years passed. The kingdom changed, as all kingdoms do. Kings died. Borders shifted. New wars rose, then faded into songs. But in the highlands, above the reach of the crown and its armies, the hollow crown endured. Travelers spoke of it in taverns, a place where no one bows, where a widow once defied the throne, where an exiled warrior built more than a fortress. He built a family. Mara grew older, her hair silvering like snow. Gareth's limp deepened, but his strength never left him. Their children, by blood and by choice, grew up climbing stone towers, learning to fight not for conquest, but for one another. And when strangers arrived at their gates, fugitives, orphans, lost souls, Mara would simply open the door and say, "You're safe. If you'll stand with us." There were no crowns in that place. No thrones. Only hands held tight across firelight. Only hearts that chose love, even when the world called it rebellion. And if this story moved something inside you, subscribe to the channel for more timeless tales of forbidden's love, resilience, and the courage to rewrite destiny. Your next escape awaits.